Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. Now, one thing we do not have coming down to us from ancient Egypt is a lot of personal stories. And this is the Autobiography of Amasis, the Naval Officer. This was transcribed by E.A. Wallace Budge. And I think it's pretty fascinating because we just do not have a lot of personal stories coming down to us from ancient Egypt. But this is one, and I think I will just read. It says, "This inscription is cut in hieroglyphics on the walls of the tomb of Amasis at El Kab in Upper Egypt. This distinguished marine flourished in the reigns of the first kings of the 18th dynasty about 1600 BC. And the text reads, "The captain of the transportmen, Amasis, the son of Abana, the truth speaker, saith, O all men, I will declare unto you and will inform you concerning the favors that were conferred upon me. 7 times I was given gold in sight of the whole land, and likewise slaves, both male and female, and grants of land for estates to be held by me in perpetuity were also made to me. Thus the name of a man bold and brave in his deed shall not be extinguished in this land forever. He saith, I passed my childhood in the town of Nekeb. My father was a soldier in the army of the king of the south, the king of the north, Sequen-Ra, whose word is truth. Baba was his name. He was the son of Rient. I performed military service as his substitute in the ship called the Bull in the reign of the Lord of the Two Lands, Neb-Petira, Amasis I, whose word is truth. I was at the time a youth and was unmarried, and I slept in the Shenu. Afterwards I got a house, i.e. a wife, for myself, and I was drafted off to a ship, the North, ? And he put some question marks in here for words I imagine that he wasn't quite sure of the translation. But he said, I was drafted off to a ship, the North, because of my bravery. Then it became my lot to follow after the king. Life, strength, health be to him. On my feet whenever he made a journey in his chariot. The king sat down and besieged before the city of Heterat, which was Avaris, and it may lot whilst I was on my 2 feet to do deed of bravery in the presence of his majesty, whereupon I was made an officer in the vessel called Caem-Menefer. The king was fighting an arm of the river of Avaris called Petechku, and I rose up, engaged in a fight, and I brought back a hand." And that simply means he cut off a hand and brought it back. Going on here, the royal herald proclaimed the matter, and the king gave me a gift of gold, which was awarded for bravery. The fighting was renewed at this place, i.e. Avaris, and again joined in the fight, and I brought back a hand, and the king gave me a gift of gold, which was awarded for bravery a second time. And here he talks about the war that took place on a branch of the Nile at Avaris, and this was the war against the Hyksos people. And he talks about taking slaves. So I believe the Hyksos were the main group of the people that went up north in the Exodus that became the people who wrote the Bible, and branches of them did split once they did get north, but I believe the Hyksos Exodus was the one that was talked about in the Bible. And here he talks about the war fighting the Hyksos people at Avaris, and once Avaris fell, that was the end of the Hyksos people, and these were the people who ruled northern Egypt. But I am just going to keep reading. He said, and the Hebrew word for Tanis, Avaris, was Zoan, and I believe that's where Zion came from when they talk about Jerusalem. But he says, Then the king fought a battle in Egypt to the south of this place, and I made prisoner a man and brought him back alive. I went down into the water and brought him along the road to the town, being firmly bound, and I crossed the water with him in a boat. The royal herald proclaimed this act, and indeed I was rewarded with a double portion of gold, which was awarded for bravery. Then the king captured Avaris, and I brought back prisoners from the town, 1 man and three women, in all four persons. His Majesty gave these to me for slaves. So when people, say, well, the Hebrews were never slaves, Well, yes and no. As a group, they weren't held as slaves to do work for the Egyptians, but in this war, their prisoners were taken and used as slaves, and that is just common. That is a story in wars throughout history. The only difference here is you were being made a slave by the greatest civilization on earth at the time. It goes on to say, then His Majesty sat down before Sharana in the 5th year and captured it. I brought back thence 2 persons, women, and 1 hand. And the king gave me a gift of gold for bravery, as well as 2 prisoners for slaves. Now, after His Majesty had smitten the Metui of Watet, he sailed up the river to Kethnefer to crush Antui of Stai. And His Majesty overthrew them completely and slew very many of them. I rose up and made 3 prisoners, viz., 2 men alive and 3 hands. And the king rewarded me with a double portion of gold and gave me the 2 prisoners to be my slaves. Returning, His Majesty sailed down the river. His heart was expanded with the bravery of strength, for he had conquered the lands of the south as well as the lands of the north. And it says, Aati, the accursed one, who came from the south, his destiny came upon him, and he perished. The gods of the south laid their hands upon him, and His Majesty found him in Thentamu. His Majesty brought him back alive, and with him were all the people loaded with fetters. I captured 2 of the soldiers of the enemy and brought them back, firmly fettered, from the boat of foe, Ati. And the king gave me 5 men and parcels of the land, 5 stat in my city, and that means in the area of my city. This was likewise done for the sailors, one and all. Then that vanquished foe came. Teton, the accursed one, was his name, and he had gathered together round about himself men with hearts hostile to the king. His Majesty smote him and accursed servants, and they ceased to exist. His Majesty gave me 3 men and a parcel of land, 5 stat, in my town. And stat means area of my town. I transported the king of the south, the king of the north, Teshkera, Amenhotep I, whose word is truth, when he sailed up the river to Kash, which is Cush in Nubia, to extend towards the south of the frontiers of Egypt. His Majesty captured that accursed Anti of Nubia in the midst of his accursed bowmen. He was brought back, fettered by the neck, and could not escape. They were deported and were not allowed to remain upon their own land, and they became as if they existed not. And behold, I was at the head of our bowmen. I fought with all my strength and might, and His Majesty saw my bravery. I brought back 2 hands and carried them to His Majesty. And the king went and raided men, women, and cattle, and I rose up and captured a prisoner and brought him alive to His Majesty. I brought back His Majesty from Kemet Hiru, and the king gave me a gift of gold. I brought back alive 2 women, and I captured in addition to those I had already carried to His Majesty, and the king appointed me to be the Ahatui en Hek, the warrior of princes, or the crown warrior. I transported the king of the south, the king of the north, Akapurkara, whose word is truth, when he sailed up the river to, these words are getting too big, to put down the rebellion in Ketland and to put an end to the incursions of the people of Asemt. I fought with great bravery in his presence in the troubled water during the towing of the fighting barges over the rapids, and the king made me captain of the transport. His Majesty, life, strength, health be to him, raged like a panther. He shot his first arrow, which remained in the neck of a vanquished foe. The enemies were hapless before the flaming serpent of his crown, on his crown. Thus were made in the hour of defeat and slaughter, and their slaves were brought back prisoners alive. Returning, His Majesty sailed down the river, having all the mountains and deserts in his hand. And that accursed Anti of Nubia was hung up heads downward at the prow of his boat of His Majesty, and placed in the ground in the Apse, i.e. Karnak. After these things, the king set out on an expedition against Rethanu in northern Syria to avenge himself on foreign lands. His Majesty went forth against Naharina, Naharaina, where he found that the wretched enemy had set his warriors in battle array. His majesty defeated them with great slaughter, and those who were captured alive were brought back by him from his wars could not be counted. And behold, I was the captain of our soldiers, and his majesty saw my deeds of might. I brought out of the fight of the chariot with its horses, and he who had been driving it was fettered prisoner inside of it, and I carried them to his majesty, and he gave me a gift of gold, a twofold portion. Then I waxed old, and I arrived at a great age, and the favors bestowed on me were many as those at the beginning of my life, a tomb in the mountain, which I myself have made. And boy, that was a really difficult story to read. There was a lot of difficult words in there, and just the way that was worded was very difficult. I hope you followed along and just caught a little bit of the story of this man's life. It's kind of a graphic, unedited story. Hope you thought this was interesting. You have a nice day.